a much closer relationship, and she became a confidant of Mrs. Lincoln, a very good friend. This quilt made by Elizabeth Keckley was made circa 1870, and it is a silk quilt. It has embroidery on it, and it is quite beautiful. It has an eagle in the center. It's important in any study of quilts of black people to recognize that black people have not lived in a vacuum in America, and that their relationship with the white majority population can be determined by quilts made by whites in which blacks have been the prime subject matter. In the days of slavery, there were quilt patterns developed by whites, such as slave chains, which denoted a sympathy for the plight of the slave. Not only do we have slave chains, but we also have radical rose. Radical rose is a pattern that was developed in West Virginia. West Virginia was the part of the state that sympathized with the Union, and the people were called radicals. The woman who made this was an Appalachian Hill woman. The quilt pattern has a black center because she felt that blacks were at the center of the conflict at the time of the Civil War, and this fact should be noted in some way. And so she made the rose pattern with the black center, and it was called the Radical Rose. The Underground Railroad pattern is another pattern that was developed during the days of slavery to denote the paths that slaves used to escape slavery and to get to freedom. There's a Bible quilt made by a black nursemaid, a slave, who was teaching her 6-year-old charge to make quilts. She designed this Bible quilt and did most of the quilting on it. What is so unusual about this quilt is that it bears a striking resemblance to the Harriet Powers Bible quilt, although it was made 30 years earlier, because it has been dated circa 1850, 53. As one looks at the blocks, many of them will show a decided difference, and it's easy to tell that two different people made the quilt. But there are two blocks that are so much alike that it is astonishing. The block in the Harriet Powers quilt of Satan and the Seven Worlds, and in this Bible quilt of Kentucky, there are such striking resemblances to each other, it's amazing. Also, the block that shows Adam and Eve and the serpent. In the Harriet Powers quilt, the serpent has feet. And in this 1853 Kentucky slave quilt, the serpent has feet too. They're constructed much the same way. They're striped in sort of a gold and black material. These two blocks are very much alike. The others are similar. But there's enough similarity there to make one wonder if there's some remote connection between those two quilts. It's a mystery at present.
The Bible quilts made by Harriet Powers are really masterworks of American folk art. One hangs in Boston's Museum of Fine Art, and one is at the Smithsonian Institution. Not much was known about the quilts and their maker until Dr. Gladys Marie Fry, Associate Professor of Folklore at the University of Maryland, began investigating Harriet Powers by looking into courthouse records in Clark County, Georgia.
I got interested in the Harriet Powers quilt because I'm interested in material culture, and particularly Afro-American quilts. And I was aware that one Harriet Powers quilt was at the Smithsonian, and I used to go down on Saturday afternoons to visit the quilt and look at it, and I was intrigued by the thought and by the fact that it had made by Harriet, an ex-slave, Athens, Georgia. No other documentation. And I began wondering what, if any, could be found about Harriet, who she was, where in Athens did she live, who her family was, and so forth. And when the Georgia Folk Art Council decided to do some research for the bicentennial, they asked me to come to Athens, Georgia, and to research the quilt, and I did so. I didn't find anything from oral tradition. I did find some information from the tax records. I went to the county courthouse and sat on the basement floor where all the old tax records were from the 19th century. And I went through 100 years of tax records sitting on the damp concrete floor of the courthouse in Athens, Georgia. And I found the Powers family listed. It listed not only Harriet's name, but it listed the name of her husband, Armstead Powers, and their 3 children. Apparently in 1886, Harriet Powers met a woman named Jenny Smith, who was a white art teacher in Athens, Georgia. Harriet made a quilt which she exhibited at the county fair, sort of like a cotton fair, I suppose we would call it. And it came to the attention of Jenny Smith at that point, who saw it and liked it and tracked down Harriet Powers, who refused to sell the quilt for any price. But apparently by 1890, the family had fallen on hard times, and she was forced to negotiate with Jenny Smith for the sale of the quilt. At that point, she approached Miss Jenny Smith, and Jenny Smith agreed to buy the quilt for $5. Harriet wanted 10, but Jenny Smith claimed she could only scrape up 5, which she did. And I would like to read that section in her diary. It said, "Last year I sent her word that I would buy it if she still wanted to dispose of it. She arrived one afternoon in front of my door in an ox cart with the precious burden in her lap, encased in a clean flour sack, which was still enveloped in a croquet sack. She offered it for $10, but I told her I only had 5 to give. After going out consulting with her husband, she returned and said, owing to the hardness of the times, my old man vows I'd better take it. Not being a new woman, she obeyed. After giving a full description of each scene with great earnestness, she departed, but has been back several times to visit the darling of her brain." So Harriet parted with the quilt reluctantly for a mere $5, thanks to her husband's advice to take the money. I became interested in trying to determine the historicity of the quilt. How accurate was it in terms of historical phenomenon? And that was one of the many miracles that happened to me during my research, as Alex Haley likes to say, phase 1 of miracles. I was teaching a graduate seminar in American folklore one night in the spring of 1974, I believe, and only one student had arrived, and we were just beginning to chat, and she said, "I just heard the most interesting paper tonight in my other class, and it concerned the days the stars fell." And I said, "What did you say?" And she said, 1933, the day the stars fell. And of course, I knew this is what Harriet had noted for one of her sections. Although she could neither read nor write, she depicted each scene to Jenny Smith. And after that point, I began to think that perhaps there was some valid historical knowledge to be obtained from the quilts. I went to the Naval Observatory, and I was able to find that the stars had fallen in November the 12th to the 14th of 1833. It was a famous Leonid meteor shower. Normally, showers like this occur 3 or 4 times a century, and they last for an hour. This shower lasted for 8 hours, and thousands of shooting stars were seen coming from the heavens. People thought Judgment Day had come, that it was raining fire. Many people thought this was the end of the world. And slaves used this date as a time-fixing device, which showed them when they were born or when people died and so forth. So that two very common time-fixing devices are surrender or the Civil War, in 1833, the day the stars fell. And apparently, Harriet, though she was born later, heard about the phenomenon and recorded it in her quilt. Several dark days have been recorded in history. I think there are 10 between 1706 and 1910, or even as many as 18, but none of them were as famous as Black Friday, May 19, 1780, I believe, May 19, 1780, when the forest fires in New England broke out, and the day was characterized by increasing yellowness and a soot that covered everything in the farm animals, the yard, the houses, and so forth. And the day got very dark at noon, so dark that they were holding a colonial meeting in Colonial Williamsburg, and they tried to cancel the meeting because they could no longer see. And some stalwart man said that we were going to talk no matter how dark it got, and the meeting continued. But May 19th, Black Friday of 1780, was a very famous day in oral tradition. Again, Harriet was not born at this time, but she must have heard about it. According to the evidence I found, it was confined to New England, but Harriet heard about it in Athens and recorded it in her quilt. Another day that Harriet indicated in her quilts was the cold day of the 10th of February, 1895. And according to the quilt block, it said, a woman was frozen at prayer, a woman frozen at a gateway, a man with a sack of frozen meal, icicles formed from the breath of a mule, all the bluebirds were killed, a man frozen in his jug of liquor. According to the data for the state of Georgia, February the 10th, 1895 was an unseasonably cold period for Georgia. The temperature went to -0 at some points, which has to be very cold for Athens, Georgia. And this must have been the date that Harriet referred to. The quilt is important because it's unique. It's unique because it's a social history document that contains both folklore and oral history, all of which proves to be quite valid. At no point in historical documents do we have a kind of quilt that can be used as a historical document. We have the folklore that she talks about, the pig that ran from Georgia to Virginia, the pig named Betts, and there's a whole legend associated with her. And we have other biblical stories, the Bible of the folk, but we have historical facts which are recorded in the quilt, legends, which Harriet apparently heard, such as the dark day of May 19, 1780, and the other legends. So it's an important social history document, which turns out to be quite startlingly accurate and valid.
Many of the quilts made by Afro-American women show design characteristics that link them to African textile designs and distinguish them from traditional European-American quilts. In general, design is emphasized over craftsmanship. The size of the stitches isn't important. What is important is how the quilt looks when seen from a distance and the impact it communicates to the viewer. The patterns are often unplanned and are made up as the quilt is sewn, and variation is stressed rather than regularity. Dr. Maud Wallman, Assistant Professor of Art at the University of Mississippi, who is organizing an exhibition of Afro-American quilts for the World's Fair, talked with us about the quilts that show African design influences.
All of the techniques, whether it be the use of strips and patching cloth together, or the use of applique, putting one cloth on top of another, or even quilting, all of these techniques are known in Africa, in different parts of West Africa in particular. One of the things that you may notice about Afro-American quilts is that they emphasize strips. There's a reason for this. One of the reasons is that in Africa, most textiles are made on narrow, portable men's looms by men who weave narrow strips from 4 inches to 15 inches wide, and then the strips are sewn together into larger textiles, which then may be tailored into clothing or used for hammocks or any number of different things, household furnishings. The strips can be aligned to create symmetrical designs, but more often they are deliberately sewn together to create asymmetrical designs, where there's a difference in sort of the beat which may be carried by a particular color from one strip to the next. There's a deliberate scattering of color beats over a textile, and you find the same thing in Afro-American quilts. The quilts emphasize vertical strips, and they emphasize this offbeat patterning. Another thing that you see in both traditions is the emphasis on multiple patterns. In African textiles, especially things commissioned for priests and kings who are wealthy, the cloth will be commissioned with many different patterns, and only the knowledgeable weaver and the knowledgeable person will know how to read those patterns and how to name them. Therefore, multiple patterning is a symbol of status. In Africa, cloth, when you see someone in distance, you can read their status and occupation by the kind of cloth they are wearing. That kind of cultural continuity you do not see necessarily in Afro-American quilts, because the whole political and economic situation is different. But there is still the aesthetic that continues, the idea that multiple patterns are an important aesthetic feature. Therefore, in many Afro-American quilts, one square, one block in the quilt may feature a typical Anglo-American pattern, such as cotton leaf in one particular quilt, and then the other 8 blocks in that quilt will feature variations on that pattern, where the quilter changes the colors or the arrangement of the pieces in the quilt block. It's very much akin to jazz in the way that jazz does improvisations on one theme. Another characteristic that you find in African textiles and Afro-American quilts is an emphasis on very bright contrasting colors. And the reason for this in Africa is because cloth, in order to be read from a distance in the bright sunlight, has to be bright, has to use contrasting bright colors. The applique tradition is very interesting. The earliest example of applique on an Afro-American textile that I've found is one that comes from New Orleans and is dated 1775. It's a Bible textile. It is not a quilt, and it is not even a single piece. It's a pair of hangings. But the applique that is done on them is very similar to the way that it is done in leather work in West Africa, in the sense that the edges are not always turned under, but are sometimes bordered with braid. My particular interest is contemporary or quilts by living traditional Afro-American quilters who live in, most of them live in the South, and most of them do patchwork quilts which emphasize strips and bright colors. There is one particular family in Mississippi which is continuing the applique tradition, and they do very, very innovative designs where they take the symbols they use, whether they're figures or animals. They are inspired by TV, by magazines, by cereal boxes. They are influenced by American culture, and the quilts, therefore, do not reflect their status in American culture, but they reflect the influence that American culture has on them. So that although the form is very similar to applique in African textiles, the meaning has changed, the function has changed. But the way they use color and the way they use strips in combination with the applique is also very much in the Afro-American aesthetic tradition and the African aesthetic tradition. The Afro-American quilt tradition may well be dying out, and that's because it's mostly practiced, mostly done by very old women. Most of the quilters I worked with were in their 70s and 80s. One particular woman in Alabama is in her 50s, but she's rare. Most younger women have been taught to value their time and think of times in terms of money, whereas the older women calculate how much the material costs them, and they're used to using scraps. Sometimes they like to be able to buy particular colors, like red, But many of them are happy and would rather use scraps and old clothing and leftover things from sewing because it's a salvage art, and they're proud of that. Whether it's picked up by a new generation, by a second and third generation, is questionable.
The research that's been done over the past 10 years is very important, for it adds another branch to the richly varied tree of the American quilting tradition and serves to document these quilts at a time when they're still being made. Thanks to quilt researchers like Questa Benbury, Maud Wallman, and Gladys Marie Fry, Afro-American quilts should gain the recognition that they richly deserve.
For a viewer's guide to accompany the series, send $8 to Quilting 2, WBGU TV, Bowling Green, Ohio. Rebroadcast of Quilting is made possible by grants from Lehman Publications Incorporated, publisher of Quilter's Newsletter magazine, and by Fairfield Processing Corporation, maker of Polyfill brand quilt batting.
Some jokes for the monologue, anything.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, I got a good one. Oh, you're out there and you think, hey, here we are laughing, having fun, having a great time. How many of us ever stopped to remember that Eleanor Roosevelt had great legs?
Oh, that's good, that's good. And then how about this one? How about this one? With the way things are now, 10 years from today, Czechoslovakia will still be hard to spell. How about that?
You like that?
Huh? What do you say?
He's not too enthused.
Oh, yes.
How about the guy, how about the 80-pound canary? You know what the 80-pound canary said?
What did he say?
Here, kitty, kitty, kitty.
That's a good one. You should use that one.
Okay, thanks. Keep typing, guys, okay?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
He's no Dick Van Dyke.
From Stage 29 at Paramount Studios on Melrose Avenue, in the heart of Hollywood, California, in these United States, on the planet we call Earth, it's the Arsenio Hall Show, starring Arsenio Hall. Tonight, Arsenio welcomes Sally Jesse Raphael, musical guest Bobby McFerrin, Sheila E. and her father Pete Escobedo, comedian Rick Dukeman, and Maury Amsterdam and Rose Marie. And now, someone say action! It's Arsenio
You doing all right, man? This is my posse, Mike Wolf and my posse. What's going on, man? Yeah.
Rob Petrie.
Oh, boy. Sandy,
Yes, Arsenio?
do I have to do this monologue that Buddy and Sally wrote?
Well, I think it'd be nice if you gave one a try.
Okay, I'm from a small town. Town so small, the main street ran through the car wash. That's enough, huh?
Yeah.
That's enough, yes. That's enough. Today has been an insane day. We had a great show already. I get a call from a young lady you might know named Sheila E. And, And Sheila E. called like an hour and a half ago, and she said, my dad's up for a Grammy, and we'd like to stop by. So I said, stop by, bring some drums and some family members. And they're here somewhere. Are they ready? Because they just... What?
Yeah.
Pete? Yeah. Yeah. Come here. Ladies and gentlemen, Pete Escovedo and Sheila E. Boy. Thanks for coming through. I appreciate it. Now you're nominated for a Grammy.
Nominated first time.
Yeah. Now what's the category?
50 years.
50 years.
Tropical Latin music.
That's cool.
Yeah, you know about that stuff?
Oh, hey.
Yes.
So you gonna hang out with us tonight?
I'm gonna hang out. We brought some drums. We brought some of the other kids. And we're gonna make some noise. We're gonna do this Latin style today. Okay?
Okay. That's cool. That's cool with me. Let me tell you who we have on the show tonight. Yeah. Okay, we got Bobby McFerrin.
Oh.
Yes. Bobby McFerrin's here. And of course, you all know who those people are over there. Those are people who are worried and very unhappy, those people over there. I'm glad Bobby McFerrin finally did that song, you know, because I was hip to him years ago, and I liked his music but could never buy it when I went to a store because I didn't know the name, you know what I mean? And you know, when you don't know the name of a song, they say, well, sing it. And you can't sing Bobby stuff, right? You find yourself in the store like, you know, and then say, just wait outside. We'll see if we can find it. But he's here, and a lady I really enjoy watching mornings when I wake up here in Los Angeles, Sally Jessy Raphael is here. There's a new Tom Hanks film on the horizon. It's called The Burbs, and his co-star, Rick Dukerman, is here. And of course, you know they're here because they're standing. What have you been doing?
Oh, I just got off tour playing with Prince.
Really?
And now I'm gonna do a new album pretty soon, and I want to play with my dad for a while.
That's hot.
Nice? Yeah.
That's hot. Are you gonna make her wear some clothes when she's out on the road with you?
Well, you know what? I think what I'm gonna do is I'll start wearing less.
Oh.
Yeah. You know, I'll come out like this maybe. I don't know.
I don't know if it would have the same effect.
I think you're right, man. I think you're right.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
I'm glad you're both here. Can we do something? Can we jam?
Yeah, you want to play something?
Yeah, let's do a little bit of something. I'll hold this for you. Yes. Who's gonna start it off? Somebody start it off. Somebody start it off, and let's just go. Just get busy. Just get busy. In G, I don't care. Yes. Thanks for coming. We'll be right back.
Toyota dealer. Whatever car truck you choose, you love the quality. Who could ask for anything more? And by the Nestle Alpine White Bar. Sweet dreams you can't resist.
Like I said, we got a great show for you, and Sheila and her dad, Pete Escovedo, will be back a little later on the show doing something. Bobby McFerrin is here, Rick Dukerman is here. And don't forget to tune in tomorrow, because we got Gregory Hines, who's going to do something interesting with Stanley Clarke. And what you, oh, see, you're so greedy. It's a great show. Everybody's here. George Bush is going to come out later and play congas. And y'all know, oh, we could have came tomorrow. Gregory Hines is going to do something with Stanley Clarke tomorrow. You don't want to miss it. And comedian Etta May, something very unusual, and Stanley Clarke. So, oh, I mentioned him. Oh, who else? Tony Curtis. How could I forget a legend? How could I forget a legend? I'm just so excited. My first guest is on the air more hours each week than probably any other broadcaster. She hosts a radio program every night and a television show every morning. And next week, we'll see her hitting the streets undercover as a lady of the evening. Let's see her at work.
Oh, I can't believe I'm doing this.
But you look fabulous. Come on, I think you're ready to go to work.
Please welcome Sally Jesse Raphael. Did I hit it? I nailed it? Okay.
That's dangerous, a man who knows that.
No, I know what I like, and it's made by Lauder Prescriptives, and what's it called?
Calyx or something like that?
Yeah.
Cadillacs? Or...
I smelled what she was wearing immediately, and I recognized it.
I am so thrilled to be here. Do you know that across America, you are by far the hottest lady? Well, you know what? People are sometimes getting hot, and they don't know it. And so when something like that happens, anyhow, I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, thank you. I was looking at this clip. Now, that show is going to air next week, right?
On Thursday, the 23rd.
Now, you look good. If I saw you and I was in that kind of mood, I'd buy something, okay? Because you looked all right. But who was the big Goodyear hooker standing next to you? I mean, how much? I mean, does she charge by the pound? What kind of... Who was that?
It's Dolores.
That was Dolores? And she's a prostitute?
And she's done windows, like in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
And she's done houses. And I don't mean painting them.
Yes.
And she's very professional about walking the street. She taught me a lot.
Now, is it, because I know men have different fetishes. Some guys like to be spanked with a hairbrush. Some guys like to smell pantyhose, Is there like a kind of man that maybe likes a big woman like that?
Oh, yeah. Chubby chasers.
Chubby chasers? Really?
Yes.
And they just want a body like that. What is...
I think maybe they want to get a lot for their money, or,
Okay, so I guess there's a logic of like, $100, and she was like, Whitney Houston, man, I want my money back, Oh.
Funny.
That's it. Did you learn a lot about prostitution?
It's a very sad, being serious for a moment, it's a very sad thing. There are a lot of victims. I'll tell you what I learned. I learned a lot about being on the street.
Mm-hmm.
And let me say that you don't do this in New York City in the dead of night just because you wake up one day and think you should. It's dangerous. It's cold. Yeah. It's tiring, and it's dangerous. I got a new respect for the street.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Oh.
Do the women carry guns or do something to protect themselves?
No, they are really victims, and no, they don't. Somebody, when I first went, there were two pros there, and I went up with my sense of, hi, like that.
Yeah.
And I made some mention of a place in Puerto Rico that I knew, and they just went like that, right into the shadows.
Yeah.
And so later somebody said, they could stick something in your rib cage faster than you can imagine. So don't play around with stuff like that.
Oh.
It's pretty awful. Oof.
I can't wait to see the show when it airs. What's the most provocative or controversial show that you've ever done?
Oh. We've done a lot. I've roller skated with the Bay City Bombers. I've driven a 16-wheel. I've worked at a restaurant as a short order waitress type of thing. The most provocative, that big thing that was happening with the nude show that some other person was doing recently? I don't know who was...
His name is Geraldo.
Okay. We did it once when we first went on the air, and we did it once about 2 years ago.
Oh, so that wasn't new, what Geraldo did?
Nothing that any of us are doing is really new. I mean, it's been going on and on and on. It's just the press right now, I think, is, pardon the jumping on it.
Yeah, okay. What show has been your favorite of all the shows you've done?
This one, because I get to meet you.
take a quick commercial, and we're gonna come right back and get down to the nitty-gritty with Sally Jesse Raphael. We're actually sitting here talking about the different shows that are around. Do you watch, like I heard Oprah say in an interview, she doesn't watch the competition. Do you watch the other people? You do? Because I do.
Wrong? I think it's great, too. You know why? Well, I think she's terrific. I think the people who are doing this, Geraldo and Phil and Oprah, I think they're good at what they do. Now, that's scary, because you want to be competitive. But I think they're very good, and I do watch them.
Oh, I think it's cool to give it up, because, you know, that doesn't make you any less than you are. You know, I give it up all the time. I think David Letterman is bad, you know? And I think Johnny is the greatest, you know? I'm just the latest. But
When you say bad, is that bad, street bad, or bad
when I say Letterman is bad, I say Michael Jackson bad, you know, without the moves. You know, he's bad like that.
Bad is good.
Yeah, you know, I came up on all these people. I dig what they do. And people make it out to be a competition. There ain't no competition. I do what I do, and people who watch me.
Exactly.
You know? It's just the way it is. But I watch you now, and in the morning, like I mentioned. How do you decide what you want to do on the show, the guests, the topics?
Great question. I don't really decide. What we do is about 60% of all shows, and please feel free to write us, are people who sit down and write us. Then we listen in elevators. You know, you become an eavesdropper.
Yeah.
Then people come up to you in the street, and then people in the audience make suggestions. And then sometimes, when we're absolutely desperate, those people that we're paying, called producers, we make them come up with an idea. Doesn't happen very often, but occasionally.
Yeah.
I rib them something awful lot. Haven't you got anything new to do? Come on, guys.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's how you stay on top.
Exactly.
Do you think you're underrated?
Well, does that... I don't think a lot about that. I'll tell you what I do. When I go home and my family is proud of me, which means a great deal to me, then I think I'm probably paid more than I'm worth. I think I'm the luckiest woman on the face of the earth.
Yeah.
Do you know, to be able to come here to California, you know, I slept in a car at one time. Today, you sent a limousine and a driver. Would I say that I'm underrated if I got to taxi around Los Angeles, looking out at people, seeing Rodeo Drive, meeting you? No. I'm just a very, very lucky person.
Yeah.
Glad to be right. How do you hoot like that? Why did they hoot?
Well, I started that on my old show because I'm from Cleveland, and Cleveland's football team was known as the Dogs. You know, and yeah, our defense was known as the Dogs, and I used to do that on the old show, and people just started doing it as a symbol of approval. If you do something they dig, you know, it's a you know. Yes. It's like, say, for instance, what do you think of Sally dressed up as a prostitute?
That's wild. I thought you didn't like me.
No, see, it used to be when people barked at you, it was like, damn, she's ugly, you know?
I thought that's what they were saying.
No, now it's
Here's another dog, bring him on out.
Oh, no, it's a symbol of approval now.
What does a woman do?
It's more like a chihuahua. Where do the red glasses come from?
Well,
And why are you carrying a spare pair?
Can I tell you?
Yeah.
You are the best dressed man on television, and there's only one thing wrong. You need a little bit of color.
Okay.
These are for you. Try them on. Try them on. Wait, just wait. Let's see. Does this... I think it's great.
Yes.
You're gonna go blind, you know, you look through this.
This is kind of cool, though.
Doesn't he?
You don't like it?
Oh, I like it.
How about just for this interview? Just for this interview. Oh, okay. You know, you talked about sleeping in cars and how tough your life has been. weren't you fired a lot, too, in your early career?
18 times.
18 times?
18. You know, some people are dissolving after they've had it once.
Yeah.
I want everybody to know, the reason I talk about being fired is that there is life after being fired. Most people who fire you are wrong. They are stupid and they are wrong. It's been a hard road. Honestly, to be serious, I've had a hard time. They used to call me the longest undiscovered overnight sensation in the history of show business. 33 years on June the 10th, right? And 25 of them, we really weren't paying the bills.
Yeah.
So the purpose of that, to say that, is not to kind of pat myself on the back, but to tell all those people who might be out in a car that there's hope and that times get better and the sun comes up tomorrow and that they can do it. If I can do it, they can.
Hey, if I can do it, they can do it.
Oh, but you
know?
got a lot of talent.
Huh? Yeah, but hey, I'm a young brother in America, and this is a country where, you know, I mean, and they told me, well, I don't know if white people will watch, you know. Everybody's watching, you know, everybody's watching. Yeah. So let's pat each other on the back. Okay.
You know, they told me we don't know if men will watch.
Really?
Sure. You're a woman. How are men going to take that when you come in with those difficult questions? Aren't they going to think that you're like, I don't know, their wife or their mother telling them what to do? So,
what was the deal with those fake guests that came on your show?
oh, I forgot to tell you about the glasses.
Oh.
All right. So, we started the television show. You have to forgive me. It's
Okay.
nighttime for me, right? Okay, guys. So I saw this ad, and the ad said, I couldn't read the teleprompter, and I was too proud to get glasses. So I saw the ad, and the ad said that it was one of those discount optical stores that if you come down, they would give you an eye exam, a pair of frames, a pap smear, everything, if you only had to pay one price. So I went down, the guy says, oh, well, we don't have any glasses. The only ones we have are these red ones. And I was not going to be traded up. There was no way. So I took the red glasses, and I put them on, and they were like $14.95, and now they've gone up, of course, but I am really stuck with them. I went into the boss and I said, what about this idea of me changing the glasses? And he looked at me and went, right, brilliant. And I thought, well, you don't always hit it, no matter what.
God, you know what? We're out of time. Would you please?
I've got
You
so
do your
much
show
to
out
tell
here?
you.
You do the show out here?
Do I do the show
Yeah,
out here?
Oh, really?
we're going to try and think of a reason to come.
And where are you going to tape it? Like at a McDonald's or, I mean, you should go to something like the beach or the Pantages. You don't know? Yeah. Oh, we'll find someplace. You got to come do it. And when you come, you got to come back here because I got like 10 questions like right at the top of my cerebrum waiting to ask you, and we're out of time.
Can I have my glasses back?
This is a spare pair?
Well, no, I own each pair. You know, that's $14.95, Buster.
Okay. I'll go buy my own because I kind of like this.
I like the way you look. The
I think
color's
it
neat.
Makes me look like a lawyer or something. It don't? She's make you look like a goon.
Sally Jesse Raphael.
We'll be back.
It's brought to you by Coors Light. There's no slowing down with the Silver Bullet, the best light beer for a good long time. And by People Magazine. People, that's what we're all about.
Don't worry, be happy has become a national motto because of our next guest. He's up for 5 Grammy Awards, including Best Pop Male Vocalist, Best Song, Best Album, and here to perform from his heart and from his soul is Bobby McFerrin.
Do you sing? Do you sing? Do you sing? Yeah, do, sing, do, come on, come on.